Alright, this is the ancient fragments of the Phoenician, Chaldaean, Egyptian, Tyrian, Carthaginian, Indian, Persian, and other writers, with an introductory dissertation and an inquiry into the philosophy and trinity of the ancients, by Isaac Preston Cory, ESQ, Fellow of Caius College, Cambridge, 2nd edition. And this is some sort of like Latin or something like that. I can't really understand it. Printed in London, William Pickering, 1832. So this is before the United States is fully a country. I don't think they even have California and Arizona quite yet. So that's interesting to think about reading this book. It's that old. So this is a bunch of, it looks like ancient Greek, but maybe modern Greek because there's spaces, so it must be Greek. I don't understand it. Some serial numbers. Okay. The ancient fragments, Phoenician, from Sanchoniatho, Chaldaean. I'm just going to read all these titles, not any of the maybe authors, none of that. I don't think that's necessary. So, dynasties of the kings of Chaldea, Assyria, Media, Persia, Thebes, and Egypt. Egyptian, Tyrian, Carthaginian, Indian, Atlantic, and Panchaean. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that's about. Oracles of Zoroaster, Hermetic, Orphic, Pythagorean, and Tyrian. Chronological. So maybe some stories. Introductory dissertation. In presenting this collection of ancient fragments to the world, some explanation of what is comprehended under that title may not be deemed unnecessary. We are accustomed to regard the Hebrew scriptures and the Greek and Latin writings as the only certain records of antiquity. Yet there have been other languages in which have been written the annals and histories of other nations. So, okay, I see what they're saying. So this is all, like, basically, like, Greek, Latin, and, I guess more like, some of the Middle Eastern older, like, Aramaic. I wonder if they're going to include Aramaic. I'm not really sure if that was really known in that time. I guess I could look it up right now and see, but I mean, Hebrew for sure, Greek and Latin, yeah, as well. But I've read actually that a lot of some of the Eastern and Middle Eastern texts and scriptures and knowledge, I guess in general, was first translated from those older languages to Arabic, and then from Arabic to more of like the European languages such as like French and like Proto-German, and even I think Latin as well. I think, but I guess they were translated from the Arabic language to Latin because a lot of those were kind of forgotten, and then they were picked up when the empires of like the Islamic empires started conquering a lot of like the African and Middle Eastern countries, and so a lot of knowledge was gathered and basically translated from those languages before they were translated into more of the modern languages we know today, like I guess French and English. And also, obviously there's a lot that's still not translated today. In any case, So, where then are those of Assyria and Babylon, of Persia and Egypt and Phoenicia, of Tyre and Carthage? Of the literature of all these mighty empires, where are even the remains? So, I mean, I guess we have like a lot of knowledge about these places now, for sure at least. I think we do have a lot of knowledge on these places now, so this book is quite old on knowing that. So I guess the knowledge that wasn't found until after 1832, so I guess maybe we're looking towards the end of the 1800s. All this was maybe during the Egyptian craze, when everybody started excavating Egypt, so they needed to fabricate stories, so to speak. I don't want to go into too much detail. It will no doubt tend to excite some reflections of a melancholy cast to look on this small volume as an answer. That all such remains are contained in it, I should be unwilling to assert, yet with some diligence and research, I have not been able to increase its size with other fragments which I could consider sufficiently authenticated. Okay. It was my wish to have included in this collection all the fragments of the earlier Gentile world, which have reached us through the medium of the Greek language. See, that's kind of like Eurocentric. This is like proto-Eurocentric, because it's not... Well, I guess we did know a lot of the Greek languages, but we are still limited on that stuff. So, like, for instance, I guess the Rosetta Stone would have been known by now, but probably not popularized at the moment it was found. So I'm assuming it was from Greek to Latin, or from Greek to French, or from Greek to, I guess, English. But that's probably not until, like, much later on. So, of the early historians of Greece, the names only of some have come down to us, whilst others, such as Eupolemus and Histiaeus, several very interesting fragments have escaped the general wreck. In the classic age of their literature, the acquaintance of the Greek historians with antiquity was generally confined and obscure, nor was it till the publication of Septuagint, I can't pronounce that they turned their attention to their own antiquities and to those of the surrounding nations, and for this reason we meet with more certain notices of ancient history in the later than in the earlier times of Greece. I mean, I guess this kind of statement right here is kind of like, it applies to like almost every nation. They kind of like, I'd say, fabricate their own stories and stuff. At least some of it, just to make them sound like more nationalistic, I would say. Maybe not quite nationalistic in earlier times, more of like a rally to, or a call to rally, or some sort of deal like that. But I guess you could classify it as like nationalism. That's like the best way for me to put it, is like nationalism. Oh shoot, where was I? Oh, and for this reason we meet with more certain notice of, and to have drawn a line then, to have inserted the earlier writers in exclusion of the later, would have been to have omitted the more valuable, to have reprinted the fragments of many authors, such as Nicholas Damascenus, a writer of Damascus of the Augustan age. Okay, so I'm assuming that's like the early Roman Empire, or at least the Roman Empire itself, because there's the Roman Republic, and then they turn into the Empire, as we would know, would have introduced with some matter worthy of attention much of a little interest. To have selected from them all the passages relating to ancient times and foreign states would have been a task as useless as laborious, and would have swelled the collection to a series of volumes. I have, therefore, for the most part, excluded the native Greek historians, and every writer of the Augustan age downwards. I have also omitted all fragments which bear about them the stamp of forgery, or productions of Hellenistic Jews, or of authors who have had access to sacred scriptures. Okay, well that's a pretty strong statement. So he's saying that Hellenistic Jews would be people in like the Eastern Roman Empire, and like I'm assuming in like those areas. I'm not really sure who this is pertaining to. This is like some sort of like pretext to, I don't even know, honestly. It's like what do they call it? They have like a special word for this. It's like those it's like the same people who started saying like Indo-Europeans or Aryans and stuff like that. It's like a white supremacist thing. So this is like a white supremacist book, possibly. That's what they want to classify it as, but I mean, sometimes when they classify things, they're not really being truthful with their classification. They do it because they want to subvert the actual like idea itself. Not that I'm saying like white supremacy is actually real or any sort of deal, but sometimes when they classify it as that, they're talking about something that is probably, I would say, profound, or something that they don't want to include in history, and they do it a lot. Or of authors who have had access to the sacred scriptures, and following the words, throw no additional light upon the subjects. So yeah, and sometimes people, I would say maybe not throw no additional light upon the subjects, but they'll also just formulate their own interpretation and kind of just utter this nonsense. I see it at church a lot with growing up, and it's just kind of like, they just interpret all these things in the Bible. I'm like, well, what are they really saying? What does the actual old text say? And what are the old text like words? Are they like symbolical of? I don't know, which is under one or other of which divisions may be classed the antediluvian books of Enoch, the fragments of Artapanus, the Syllabine oracles, the correspondence of Solomon and Hiram, king of Tyre, the tragedy of Ezekiel, in which Moses figures as the hero with several compositions of a similar description. Okay, I don't really understand this statement. The tragedy of Ezekiel, in which Moses figures as the hero. Is there some sort of prophecy in Ezekiel that speaks about Moses? I mean, I know they're different books, but Moses comes, like, I think way later than what happened in Ezekiel. Ezekiel's like really old, and then Moses is like more of a modern thing, so I don't know how in which Moses would figure as a hero due to the tragedy. I mean, isn't that Cyrus the Great? What is this? I thought it was Cyrus the Great that like freed the Jews from Babylon. This is book saying. That's interesting. Maybe they got it. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe something's said here that's kind of interesting. The contents, then, of this volume are fragments which have been translated from foreign languages into Greek, or have been quoted or transcribed by Greeks from foreign authors, or have been written in the Greek language by foreigners who have had access to the archives of their own countries, yet to render the collection more useful, and as it were a manual to the chronologist and mythological antiquarian, I have added by way of supplement such fragments and extracts as appear to have descended from more ancient sources, though they are now to be found only in the works of Greek or Latin writers. Some of these are merely illustrations of the fragments or contain detached chronological notices or such other curious information as may be well deemed worthy of a place. Thus I have endeavored to comprise in the volume all the genuine relics of antiquity which precede the era of Grecian history, and which lies so scattered among the folios, chiefly of the fathers and philosophers of the Lower Empire, as to be inaccessible to the antiquarian unless in the neighborhood of some large public library. So they want to say Grecian history is like, I think, Dorian and Ionian groups. So Ionia is in Anatolia, and I think the Dorians are like more of the like Macedonians and people from the northern lands. I really want to say, I can look that up right now. Let's see. Sorry, the typing's quite loud. Let's check it out. Thought to have gained their... Let me see, no, I think it's the Mycenaeans. So let me see. I think the Mycenaeans come from Macedon. Who were the Proto-Greeks? And what regions do they come from? So they like to say Italy is kind of an extension of, sorry, I'm like letting ChatGPT load. Italy is an extension of Greece, and it was once called Magna Graecia, and so those colonies of like Iberia, which is Spain, and I think like basically along the Mediterranean, like Italy, they want to classify those as Greek colonizers or Greek colonies that, like, you know, they went from those areas to there. That's what they like to say. Okay, the Proto-Greeks were early Indo-European speaking people who were considered ancestors and migrated from the southern Balkans and the Aegean region so I think the Aegean, let's see. Aegea is like northern Greece. Aegean Sea. Aegean Islands. Let's take a look at the map images. Yeah, so the Aegean Sea, they would have came from there, so those would have been Ionians, and I want to say Dorian groups. I mean, let's see what I'm like looking up stuff, and then let's say ChatGPT is also saying, yeah, they come from modern day Ukraine and southern Russia. That's what they would call it, but it was like, I mean, those areas were like Bulgaria, maybe, stuff like that. And yeah, so they primarily settled, but see, where those come from is another story. Those people in Northern Europe, because that would have been a long time ago. If there's like, that would have been like what, 800 BCE? Because like the Greek colonies or Greek city-states were, yeah, it's saying they migrated to the southern Balkans, Proto-Greeks, in the Aegean region, like up to 2000 BC. So it's like, they come from Iran, or that area, and then they go to, I guess, like Turkey and Greece in like 2000 to 2500 BCE. I guess, yeah, just a lot. You can look it up as well. So let's continue. Let's see here. Miscellaneous as such a collection might be at first supposed, it will be found to resolve itself into two subjects, the early history and the ancient theological systems of the world. In the following pages I have endeavored to present a sketch of both, not with a view of entering into the details, but rather as a method of connecting the fragments with one another, to facilitate an examination of their contents by directing the attention successfully to those great landmarks which stand prominently forth amidst what might otherwise be deemed a wild, pathless, and indeterminable, and to enable the reader, by following the same order of perusal, to elicit something like a regular continued narrative. In the scriptures we have a brief but authenticated account of the earliest ages, but among the heathen writers, with the exception of some very valuable historical fragments, we have little more than a collection of allegories and legendary tales. Upon examination, however, most of these legends, notwithstanding their obscurity, will be found to contain references to those grand primeval events whose memory was retained among every people upon earth, and for the commemoration of which were ordained so many of the ceremonies and mysteries of the ancients. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here, and we'll continue in the next part. But this is just really interesting stuff, especially with this collection of allegories. And you're gonna hear me say that's pretty interesting because these people write these things and then they just get overlooked or not looked at ever again, and it's kind of like, what I'm also interested is in like early accounts of like Portuguese sailors, what they said when they came to these lands, not just like what we get from, I would say, like a secondary source. It's almost like a secondary source. It's like the Portuguese writers and people who have the legends and would come back, from sailing and saying this and that about the country, and then like the earliest accounts, I guess, would have not really been translated. You'd have to be lucky to know some Portuguese. Otherwise, a lot of it wouldn't be translated. In Spanish as well. I mean, just think about it. What in some areas, you know what I mean? Like this book, for instance, what did they say? Like 1832. Like that is such a long time. I mean, there was no American full on American empire. It was really just like, President Jackson going into those lands, and then it's just this is before the gold rush, so the Spanish are in those lands, and they have like their cities and stuff like that, and a lot of these buildings are just so much older, and they're here before the big cities, like we hear about Lewis and Clark and stuff like that, but it's like the Spanish were already over there. They were already in those lands doing that stuff. The French were already over there. And Louisiana Purchase, it was all that land, and it was just exploring all of it, and then going all the way to, just California and along that west coast. And there's just nobody there except just like some natives. And then there's like, the Spanish, I want to say like Spanish missionaries, because that's what we know is along the coast that was here before 1840. So, the person who wrote this is obviously an Englishman. This is it's gonna have its perspectives on stuff, but it's just really interesting sometimes, and especially some of the other books that we look at that are much older too, like the 1700s books. Like, it's incredible to see what it was like. It's like jumping into like those time periods and really like picking apart what was being said, the dialect, and we're lucky to have those books even translated, because I'm sure there's some French books with some people, texts and stuff that we just don't know about. They're just not translated or not looked at because they don't want to talk about certain things. And it's like, oh yeah, Marco Polo. Everybody just talks about Marco Polo being the first. But certainly there's other people way before all that. And like, it's just obviously all lost to us. So, like this book points out, some of the legendary tales and such. It's just really interesting how they get passed down and really have some really old memories of the ancients and stuff. So it's good to take a look at this. We will continue in the next part.